Hey everybody, I'm Robert. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome down here to Katzweiler to Autohaus Henn, the Toyota dealer where we picked up the Yaris from. As you can see, they've gone ahead and ripped apart everything out of the car. They've got the motor out. We have got basically just a mess of parts from here to there. And we'll talk about a few of the parts because I think this might be one of the first times that we get to see the GR Yaris motor completely torn apart. I'll also show you what was broken, what was damaged, and what we need to replace and repair. So let's go ahead and jump right in. As you see right here, we've got the motor, the block basically stripped down with the cylinder head off. So we have the 3 cylinders, 1, 2, and 3. You can see my cylinder. So what we couldn't see was the damage to the top of the piston. These are, you can't even feel these with your fingernail. You can feel this though. So we're going to look at the availability of pistons, see if we can get a piston in time and replace it. If not, we'll have it all cleaned up at a machine shop and have it ready to go. There's I mean, you can barely feel any of this. The only thing you can feel is right here on the corner, but all of this is actually just marks. There's actually no imperfections due to anything up here. It's only this one down here where you can actually feel a very slight imperfection. So what we want to do is make sure that this is obviously safe and intact, and that there's no hot spots created during combustion that could basically cause pre-ignition or something like that. So that is the motor. As you look around, you can basically see everything that we have going on. This is the end of the crankshaft right here. Then you've got the gearing here, which actually has a chain on it and would ultimately connect to the cylinder head and turn the camshafts, which ultimately moves the rocker arms, which or the lifters, which moves the rocker arms, and then moves the valves up and down. So that's basically what we have here. If we turn around over to this side, we can see the cylinder head. So this is the cylinder head. As you can see, we have our intake valve, which slides in here, and this intake valve is the one that was damaged. You can see, if I can rotate this for the camera really nice, you can see that when it kissed the top of the number 1 piston, it actually bent it a little bit. And so that was why we were getting no compression in the number 1 cylinder. This was slightly bent and it wasn't able to seat and close off. So once the piston hit it, it just pushed it in lightly, left it in there. It looks like it probably hit it maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And that's what you can see here as well. You can see about 5 or 6 hits where it hit it and just slowly pushed it back up in, and ultimately wedged it in so that it wouldn't move anymore. That's why we weren't getting compression. What caused this valve to drop was ultimately during the high revolutions. You have the rocker arm right here. You can see that the way that the rocker arm is worn, let me find exactly where that is on these sides right here. You can see that it was operating loose before it came out. You have a bearing that goes inside the rocker arm. I can't put it all the way together obviously now, but during the high RPMs, this bearing ultimately failed and this pin came out. This is the pin that holds the rocker arm into the cylinder head. So this pin goes through here, goes through this bearing, and that's what holds the rocker arm in place. And when this assembly failed, the rocker arm started to be able to walk off and was able to break off. I'll flip over the cylinder head right here so you can see it. Again, this is absolutely amazing how small this motor is and how light everything is to work with. Let me grab a rocker arm real quick. So these rocker arms, basically, you have this is basically a hydraulic lifter that pumps up and creates pressure, slides in here, and then this rocker arm is mounted. This rocker arm is mounted on top of here, right? And this rocker arm works back and forth on top of the valve stem and from the lifter and creates a pivot point, and that's what moves the valve open and closed as the camshaft turns. Okay, so that's how that's laid out. This bearing right here, as you can see, it's intact here. This pin came out, this bearing was damaged, and that let the rocker arm start to move side to side. And ultimately, when this rocker arm got dislodged, it hit this retainer clip. So come in here and you can see this retainer clip right here. It hit that retainer clip and ultimately broke off the retainer clip right here at the valve stem. I'll go ahead and grab a piece of that and show you what that looks like. So this is the valve right here. Normally the spring would sit on top of that, and then you would have this retainer clip would be in here, okay? And this, which would normally be more intact, obviously 2 pieces, goes in like that and wedges in there, and that's what holds the spring in place. Well, obviously through all of the chatter and valves floating, whatever happened exactly, you can see that this started getting hit on the top and started getting beat up. You should never have contact on this. This should always be on here, and the contact should be on the top of the valve as the whole assembly bounces up and down. So that broke out, and then this valve retainer clip actually came apart. As you can see, things started breaking apart, and that's when the valve spring came apart and the valve dropped in. Okay, so gets you an idea of what we're looking at. Yeah, we've got, considering the circumstances, a very low amount of damage. They've gone through and every single bearing is accounted for, every single piece of metal, every clip is accounted for. There's no signs of any metal inside of any of the bearings in the motor. So I would say we've gotten very, very lucky in that regard. The cylinder head everything looks in good shape. All of the valves, there's been no contact on any other retainer. There's been no other problems. Come over here and I'll show you guys all of the rockers and lifters and everything like that. What we've decided is that these are all in good shape. When you look at them, you could in theory put these back in the motor, but I've made the decision that just because we know what happened, we know that this thing was over revved, I don't want to have some sort of a failure point inside of one of these bearings that we don't know about, and then all of a sudden put a bearing back in or put a rocker back in and have it fail in 1,000 or even 10,000 kilometers. So we are going to go ahead and replace all of that. The last thing that we have, this is the intake camshaft. So, I mean, we'll do kind of a little version of this so you can see what's going on. Is this would be sitting up here, and you can see that each one of these lines up with the recess for the valve pocket in the piston. So as this rotates, that's what lifts up the rocker and pushes it up and down, so that or actually pushes it up, the springs pull it back down, so that the valves will come up and down on intake and exhaust stroke. This is only the intake cam. The exhaust cam is sitting on this side. But if you look right here, you'll see very slight damage where it's scratched up. So again, I've seen people reuse something like that, but we're going to go ahead and order a new camshaft. It's very smooth still, but you can see some light scraping if there's a hardened coating on it or the metal's hardened. We don't ever want to see it start to come apart. And put oil or put metal shavings in the oiling system, so we're going to replace the intake camshaft as well. So what we have over here, finally, if we look one more time, just to get you guys a better idea, these are just basically the tracks for the camshafts, so that they're mounted into the head. Then we have this is basically the timing gears, so these mount on the end of the camshafts, and this is what the timing chain goes around from the crankshaft around these gear sets here, and ultimately what rotate the camshaft. So this is just a little look. I mean, we've got parts and everything you can imagine. It kind of goes on and on and on. It goes from turbos to AC compressors to alternators to output shafts. Yeah, the list goes on and on. You can see inside what the engine bay looks like. We've got the exhaust going down. Yeah, it's quite a complicated car. Everything's compact, but everything's so small. It's just a trip when you look at it and you see how tiny everything is. But one thing that I did notice is as you start looking at the motor, they did a lot of things when they, let me grab this cover right here. When they started building this, they did a lot of neat things where they broke basically covers and things down into multiple pieces, so you could actually get to a timing chain without taking off the entire front of the motor. So that's something that I did notice that I liked from their, I guess you could say, design perspective. It seems like there's been a lot of thought put into it, into actually maintaining the car or even just working on and repairing. So yeah, guys, I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of what's going on with this car. Right now we're looking at probably the first week in April before some of these parts get here. I think the rocker arms were going to be 8 April and the camshaft maybe a couple days after that. So let's see how that goes once they get everything. In the meantime, they're going to be obviously cleaning and prepping and making sure every surface is good to go. But in the meantime, the car will just be sitting here waiting for parts, waiting for a new valve train. But I can tell you that from a perspective of what happened, it is the best possible scenario. In the initial looks of the computer, there's nothing that shows an over rev, so that must mean that it wasn't as high as, yeah, I guess it could have been. I think that if you would have had something like 13,000 RPM, it probably would have sent the valve through the piston. So I think we got very, very lucky in that regard. But yeah, stay tuned for more. I mean, I think this is a pretty good look at this motor and, you know, how it's put together and what we damaged. So hope you guys enjoyed. Take it easy.